My brothers and sisters, a few days ago we were holding here called by name Sunday, and that was a focus on vocations, especially vocations to the priestly and religious life. On that occasion, many of us priests shared with you something about our personal vocation to the priesthood as we try to illustrate the nature of that vocation. And I was one of those who shared some of my own experience as someone being called by God to serve Him and His people in the priesthood. Today, there's also a focus on vocation, and Jesus is calling the disciples to be fishers of men. And, you know, this call to be fishers of men is not only issued to the apostles and their successors, the bishops, nor only to the priests, the deacons, and the religious, but it's actually a call that is sent out to each one of us and to all of us in the church. And I'd like to focus a little bit today with you on your vocation as lay people. What is your vocation? Because God is calling each one of you to be a fisher of men. That means to draw people into the church, into the boat of Peter, by the sheer power of the Word of God. Okay, and so it's your call to take that word out. And so, in what way are you called? Now, the church has an expression that we use to sum up how each one of us is called. And they use the expression that we are called, each of us, according to our state in life. So there are many ways in which your state in life provides you with opportunity and occasion to bring God's gospel to those around you. So, first of all, let's start here right in the church. You come here, you are called by God to give glory to God and to acknowledge Him for who He is and what He does in your life. That's the first call, is to come and to be God's people together. Now, in this community, we have different things that we do. And so, for example, there are readers, and I was just thinking, I wish I had a good voice like that second reader. Then I could proclaim the gospel with much greater effect. But, well, I've been given this voice, and he's got that voice. And each of you has your own gift that God is giving you to help build up the community. And you need to ask yourself, what can I do for the community? And if you say, what can I do for the community? You're saying, what can I do for God? How can I be a witness to that word which draws people into the people of God? So it's good for you, each one today, to think about that, because each of you has received a gift from God. That is written in the scriptures, St. Paul tells us. Each one of us has been given a gift from God according to the purpose of God for the mutual building up of the church. So think of the different ministries we have, and you might be able to help in that. So, I think of someone that I knew here over 25 years ago when I was stationed in this parish. His name was Bob Glasgow. Many of you will remember Bob. Um, when Bob retired, I used to regularly see him around the church grounds here and in the church buildings, and he was always uh, doing something to help maintain the physical buildings of the church. And that was a very big thing. He even um, he even put up a shelf for me in which I could sort my papers and my letters. I still have that shelf today in my office. And Bob did that, and Bob used to also help with the benediction experience. He learned perfectly how you must do benediction, and he used to show the service, and he used to prepare the sacristy. All that stuff Bob did, and he was retired, and that's how he used what God gave him to be able to help build up the church. And I think of Sam Lavario and his wife Gloria. They're also from this parish, and they have been a great help to me as a priest. They would help me to set up things in my room that I need to keep functioning. Sam even made me a little, like a desk on which I could do my studies. Sam helped me with my bookshelves, a lot of things. And there's a lot of people here come out here sometimes early in the morning in the weekdays, and I see, there's men out there, and they are providing food for people, like St. Vincent de Paul people, Knights of Columbus, and all that. They do this stuff. So these are some of the ways God can call you to be a living, active member in the church. But also, when you go out of the church, you also have an important vocation. So each of us, in some ways, is a member of a family or some community. And we need to ask ourselves, what opportunities does my place in my community or my family give me to proclaim the gospel? I think I told you maybe at another mass I mentioned about how my mother evangelized her little grandchildren. In the evening she would say mass. I would say, in the evening we would say the rosary together, and but when the grandchildren came to visit, then she wouldn't do the whole rosary, but just one decade, because it would become a bit long for them and they start to fidget and all that. But she had a little ritual where she lit the candles in front of Our Lady's statue. And usually she had something beautiful there in honor of Our Lady, like flowers or so. And then when it came to lighting the candles, then the little girls, they all wanted to blow out the match, She would, and then they would say, no, it's my turn, it's my turn. But they would look forward to blowing out the little flame, and that was how they were getting drawn into the net of the church by the gospel. And so there's millions of little ways that you can proclaim the gospel to your children and your grandchildren, your nephews and your nieces, just by living your faith. You don't have to say a lot of words. You just have to make your faith evident and visible in what you do, in the practices you have at home. Like, for example, never sit down to eat without praying together the prayers before you eat, grace before meals. Never get up from the table without praying the grace after meals. Because as it says in theology, the law of prayer is the law of faith. In other words, our faith is expressed in our prayers. And so when you pray together, you're proclaiming the gospel in the form of prayer. If you go to a restaurant and you make the sign of the cross and start to pray quietly there, people are looking at you. Some will mock at you, but you're proclaiming the gospel. You're proclaiming the mystery of the Trinity and the mystery of the cross and the mystery of our redemption, just in that one action. God doesn't ask you to do complicated things. Yeah, maybe He does sometimes, depending on your profession or the work that you do. But in general, to proclaim the gospel involves not complicated things, but practical things. So I ask you to realize and remember that you have a great power to proclaim the gospel. I like to say to people about my own calling that my mother taught me more theology informally than I formally learned in the seminary or after the seminary in Rome. I learned much more, or perhaps in more depth. And when I studied theology, I did not learn anything that I did not already know from my mother, my father, and the Catholic school. So, uh, and look, I'm just a kid, but I sucked in and absorbed the faith through the way the grown-ups were living and manifesting and witnessing to that faith. So realize you have great power to proclaim the gospel. And if you happen to be a teacher in a school, think that every day you've got those children and you can do something for them. I remember the principal in my school. One day he came into the class, and the principal was like God for us. And he came into the class and he said, because we were still tiny, he said, "Baby boys and baby girls, I want you to do me a favor." And so we were all sitting up. We'll do anything to please the principal. And so he took a piece of white chalk and he wrote on the green board, in large letters, the word "why." And he looked at us and he said, "If you ask that question, you will make me very happy." And brothers and sisters, won't only make Mr. Daniels happy, but it will turn you into, in the true traditional sense of the word, a scientist. Because a scientist is one who can explain things through their causes. He can tell you, when he looks at something, he can say, that happens like this because of that. So eventually he'll be able to tell you when you're bigger. When you hear the police siren or the ambulance, it seems to be soft, and then it gets louder, and then it gets softer. He'll tell you that's a Doppler effect. In other words, he'll tell you why you're hearing that difference in volume. He'll tell you why, and that is science, is to know why things are the way they are. And the queen of the sciences is theology. And when you ask yourself in the scriptures, why does Jesus say this? Why does he say that? Then you are learning the science of God, because as soon as you ask the question, your mind becomes receptive to the answer which God will show you at the right time. And so, if you are a teacher, realize that whether you teach in a Catholic school or in a secular school, but you have great power to evangelize. And you can take it even further. You go into your workplace. If you are working, realize that in your work situation, you have many opportunities to show what Christ is like and to show what God is all about, the way you behave. So I think of two things in my personal experience that's remained with me always. One was when I first came to Rome, and I was in the airport, and I felt very insecure because I knew nothing. I didn't know the language. I knew nobody there. And I couldn't read the signs in Italian. And then I realized I needed one of those carts to convey my luggage. So I went up to this cart, and there was an attendant standing there. So before I even reached him, he pushed the cart gently towards me, and I said to him, "Thank you." And he said, "Prego." It means, "You're welcome," you know. And that really made me feel so welcome in Fiumicino Airport in Rome so many years ago, so that I don't forget it today. And other years, many years ago, when I first landed in Canada, I was passing through Canada to come through the USA eventually. As I came to I think it was customs or something like that, but they required me to show some forms, and I showed them what forms I had. And they said, "But where's that other form? It's a white card. Do you have that?" So I was all flustered. I thought, well, how am I going to find this now? So I had a file of documents in my hands, and I was rummaging through these documents. And the lady said, uh, "Take your time, take your time." And she totally put me at ease. And in no time, I found what I had to submit to her. But if you can put a person at ease who is anxious, my brothers and sisters, who had a bad day, who's got problems with their husband or wife or their children, and and you can see that they are in difficulty of some sort, and instead of being impatient with them at your job, you think, "I wonder what's going on inside that person," and you try to make their life as good as you can at that moment, in that place. You are proclaiming the gospel. You are showing them what it means to be a disciple of Christ. And so I do want to say to you, even the simplest and humblest activity that you may be perform, even if nobody sees it, even if you are a mechanic in a garage or a repair shop, and you are tightening a nut on a wheel, tell yourself, somebody's life is riding on this wheel. I want to make sure that it's properly done so that nobody's life is at risk. I mean, you are making Christ present there at that moment, and that's what it's all about. That's what he wants you to do. So I do ask each one of you today, just as I shared with you about my own vocation to the priesthood, you think about your vocation as a layperson, a member of a family, a member of a parish, a person in a certain job. Think how you can make Christ visible, tangible, present where you are. That is to bring the gospel to the world and to the poor.